I've always said rock stars are toddlers with expensive toys. Apparently this time the toy was me. The studio smelled like burnt espresso and old guitar strings, comfort and threat in equal measure. Acoustic panels swallowed our footfalls. A red light above the door glowed like an irritated eye, on air. I adjusted my leather jacket, rolled my shoulders back, and set a stack of contracts on the console, as if I were laying down a royal flush. "Morning," I said, as a snare drum yawed in the corner, and a loose cable tried to trip me like a jealous ex. "Congratulations on the deal, I'm Remi. I'll be shepherding this circus into legend." 3 heads popped up from behind a fortress of amps. The drummer, tattoos like constellations, gave me thumbs up. The bassist, sleepy and suspicious, nursed a can of something promising. Focus and calm, 2 traits in short supply around musicians. And then he walked in. Cass. He came in late the way a thunderstorm arrives, like he'd been there all along, waiting above the city until the sky forgot how to breathe. Tall, long hair tugged back, sharp jaw, faded black tee that had definitely seen more stages than laundromats. His eyes flicked over me with surgical economy. "Not worth the trouble," his look said. "Try me," mine answered. "Who's the suit?" he asked, dropping onto a stool that complained like an old groupie. I glanced down at my black jeans and boots, then back up with a smile. "If this is a suit, your definition of couture is very forgiving. I'm the producer assigned to your project. The label wants this album delivered in 12 weeks, 3 singles, front-loaded, and a live session filmed by week 6 for the rollout." The drummer let out a low whistle. The bassist whispered, "Bold." Cass leaned back, balancing on 2 stool legs. "You look like you'll get washed out by the first downbeat." I tilted my head. "And you look like you already did, by your last flop." The drummer choked on his laughter and slapped the tom. The bassist spun his can around to hide a grin. Cass's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Cute," he said, setting the stool on all 4s. "Do you always open meetings with jokes you'll regret?" "Only when the room is begging for an icebreaker." I slid the top contract toward him with a pen. "These outline expectations, budget, deadlines, creative latitude. You'll have more than you think, less than you want, and enough to make. The record you've talked about in every interview since 2019. He stared, but didn't reach for the pen. The last producer tried to quantify our sound with mood boards. He was allergic to noise. "I'm allergic to excuses," I said. "You bring noise, I'll bring shape. Together, we bring something that doesn't vanish after the chorus." Drummer, Tano, I remembered, tapped the rim and murmured, "Kinda like this guy." The bassist, Lark, caught my glance and mouthed, "Sorry in advance." I decided I liked him. Cass raised one eyebrow. "Shepherd, huh? You don't look like much of a shepherd." "Wolves are famously poor at telling shepherds from other wolves," I replied, and the room went very quiet. I felt my pulse in my throat, a quick, traitorous flutter I refused to translate. "Not here, not now." He took the pen at last, clicked it once, an executioner testing the blade. 12 weeks is a joke," he said. "Comedy keeps everyone young," I said. "We'll start with 3 tracks. You choose the skeletons, I help them walk." "We don't need help walking." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. Up close, I could see the shadows under his eyes, the sleepless hours. "Fame burn, old and new. Then we'll run," I said, setting a pair of headphones on the console. "Show me what you've got." Tano perked up, grabbed sticks. Lark slung his bass. Cass sighed like a door slamming in an empty house, then reached for his guitar. The first chord he struck was almost a dare, too hard, too bright. It snapped across the room and died fast. "Again," I said. He played it again, jaw tighter. "Again," I repeated. Tano grinned. "I like him." Cass didn't. "You got a note, Shepherd, or are we doing your cardio routine?" "Just one," I said. "Pretend you're not trying to impress anyone, and for the love of groove, let the downbeat breathe. Your first chord is a punchline to a joke no one told." Tano barked a laugh. Lark pressed his lips together like he'd been waiting months to hear someone talk to Cass like that. Cass stared at me as if he were deciding whether to snap or sing. I waited. I've built a career on waiting better than anyone else. Finally he rolled his neck, reset his grip, and played. The chord rang truer, a hair behind the beat, the difference between swagger and stumble. "There," I said softly. He blinked. "You hear that?" "I hear what you're trying to make me hear." I stepped toward the talkback. Run it with drums, half-time on the verse, explode on the pre. We did. It was messy in the way storms are. Chaotic. Inevitable. I threw out references like breadcrumbs, think alley district not stadium, keep the alley wet though. Bess. Do a drag on bar 3 like you're late to a secret. Vocals. Sing it as if your mouth is a bruise you don't want touched. Tano's cymbals shimmered, Lark's line began to glow. Cass's voice, raw velvet, cut through it all, a blade wrapped in tape. Half an hour later, we had the ghost of a track. Not a song yet. A haunt. The kind that follows you into better rooms, and stands in corners humming until you turn the lights up. Cass removed the headphones. Sweat making a crescent at his hairline. You push hard, he said. You pull harder, I answered, jotting time codes. That's why it works. He smirked, exhausted and defiant. You talk like a therapist. I charge like one too, I said. The room warmed with easy laughter. Even Cass softened. The tiniest amount. When we broke, I laid the marked-up contract in front of him again. Take it home, read it. We sign tomorrow, we start tomorrow. He tapped the paper. You're really going to make us deliver in 12 weeks. We're not delivering, I said, meeting his gaze. We're detonating. Tano whooped. Lark pretended to shield his eyes from our combined arrogance. Cass's grin, wolf, again, came back for a second. Detonating, huh? Hope you brought a fire extinguisher. Hope you brought songs, I said. We stood too close for a beat too long. I told myself it was strategy. I've always been good at compartmentalizing. The producer, the project, the secret no one could afford to know. Not here. Not now. He looked at me as if I were a puzzle he'd solved 1,000 times. You're very sure of yourself, he said finally. Someone has to be, I answered. It's contagious. Confidence? He asked. Great records, I said. And I don't lose. He leaned in just enough. Everyone loses. Not me. I lied. He laughed under his breath and pushed back from the console. Fine, we'll play. But if you waste our time, you'll write a scathing lyric and pretend it's not about me, I finished. I'm trembling already. Keep trembling. He slid the contract into a battered leather folder. See you tomorrow. Shepherd. See you tomorrow. Wolf. He left first, taking the thunder with him. Tano and Lark drifted after, trading looks and low jokes I pretended not to hear. The studio quieted. I closed my eyes for a second, listening to the ghost of the track, the heartbeat under it. In the glass of the control room window, my reflection looked back, leather jacket. Steady smile, the tiny tremor in my throat that nobody here could decode. I pressed a palm to the console, grounding myself in dials and faders and the holy hum of electricity waiting for orders. If Cass thought I'd fold, he didn't know me at all. If he thought I'd bend, he hadn't heard how I can growl. Studios look glamorous in photos. Amber lights, polished knobs, sleek glass walls. In reality, they're graveyards of half-dead energy drinks, tangled wires that evolve into sentient trip hazards, and the faint smell of sweat trapped in foam panels. By day 3, this place was less cathedral of sound and more war zone. And the warlord was Cass. Too clean, he snapped, pulling off his headphones. You're sterilizing it. It's called clarity, I said, not looking up from the waveform scrolling across the monitor. Audiences prefer not to choke on your reverb. It's rock, not easy listening. Right now, it's neither. Tano, the drummer, snorted into his sticks. Lark, the bassist, ducked behind his amp, shoulders shaking. I'd give them credit, they tried not to fuel the fire. But it was hard to ignore Cass when he lit himself like a bonfire every 10 minutes. I rubbed the bridge of my nose. Cass, you're flat in the second chorus. His head whipped toward me. I am not flat. Sharp then. Half a semitone. You're landing between the note and the trash. Tano spat soda all over his snare. Cass's glare could have stripped paint. You're imagining things. Nobody hears that. I do. I swiveled to face him. And if I hear it, they will. That's my job. You can thank me later when people aren't skipping the chorus. He leaned back against the mic stand, crossing his arms. Your ears are too precious. You can't just sing it again, I cut in, tapping the talkback. His jaw clenched. For a second I thought he'd storm out, but then he inhaled, stalked up to the mic and sang the chorus again, loud, raw, defiant. I waited until the note wavered. Cat meowing in heat. The room exploded. Tano fell backward off his stool, cackling. Lark slapped his bass strings like a rim shot. Even the assistant engineer wheezed behind the glass. Cass froze, hands still on the mic. His eyes narrowed into twin gun barrels. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," I said, deadpan. "Cat, heat. You want me to play it back? I can loop it for the group." "Don't you dare." I raised a brow. "Then fix it." He ripped the headphones on again, muttering under his breath. The next take, God help me, was perfect. The note soared exactly where it should. Ragged enough to scrape the skin, solid enough to draw blood. I leaned into the console, murmuring, "There it is." He heard me. His lips twitched, almost, not quite, a smile. We kept going. All day. Into the night. Coffee turned into energy drinks, turned into half-stale donuts, scavenged from the kitchen downstairs. My shoulders burned from hours hunched over the board, but I didn't let Cass see me wilt. He wanted me exhausted, begging for mercy. He didn't get it. "You're pushing tempo," I told Tano at 3 a.m. "No, I'm not," he said automatically. "You're rushing by 4 milliseconds. Trust me, I can hear it." Tano groaned but adjusted, and suddenly the groove locked in. Even Cass's head bobbed involuntarily before he caught himself. We ran the track again. Cass on vocals, the others on instruments. The air thickened. Notes collided, bled into each other, but this time they didn't break, they fused. Cass stepped closer to the booth window, eyes burning through the glass. "More bite," he barked. "Less bark," I shot back. "Let the silence between the words chew for you." His mouth curved like he'd swallowed a challenge whole. He growled the verse instead of singing it, low and dangerous, and I swear every hair on my arm stood on end. "Better," I whispered, forgetting the mic was still live. His smirk told me he heard. By the 5th hour, exhaustion blurred into something else. He brushed past me to grab water, his shoulder grazing mine. It was nothing, it was everything. Static snapped down my arm. He didn't apologize. Neither did I. Later, leaning over the same lyric sheet, our hands hovered too close on the paper. His knuckle almost brushed mine before he pulled away, muttering, "We should change that line." "You're just afraid it rhymes," I said. "I'm afraid it's weak." "Then sing it strong." The stare he gave me should have been lethal. Instead, it landed somewhere closer to magnetic. I looked away first, pretending to adjust a fader. The track grew teeth over hours, jagged and glittering. Every fight sharpened it. Every insult hammered it into shape. We weren't working together. We were colliding until sparks lit the room. At sunrise, the first real mix played back. The speakers crackled, hissed, then let loose a roar of sound that filled every corner. Raw. Imperfect. Alive. Tano whooped, tossing sticks in the air. Lark collapsed on the couch, muttering, "That's it. That's the one." Cass didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, sweat-damp hair sticking to his cheek, chest rising and falling like he'd sprinted through fire. Then his eyes slid to mine. "You hear it?" he asked quietly. I swallowed, throat tight. "Yeah. I hear it." We didn't smile. We didn't need to. The track did it for us. By accident or war, we'd made magic. And for the first time, I wondered what else we might set on fire if we kept colliding. When songs go viral, no one warns you about the noise. They only talk about numbers, streams, charts, playlists, shares. What they don't mention is the avalanche that follows. Phones that never stop buzzing, journalists clawing at doors, managers screaming into Bluetooth headsets like generals mid-battle. 3 days after we finished the track, the office of the producer house looked like it had been invaded. Every TV mounted on the walls was playing our song. Every intern carried triple lattes like it was doomsday prep. The receptionist whispered, "It's at 5 million streams already." On day 2, I barely had time to process. One moment, I was fielding calls from executives begging for interviews. The next, I was dragged into a press room where Cass's face was projected 10 feet tall behind us. Cass, is it true this is your comeback single? Remi, how did you capture this raw sound? Rumors say the track was recorded in one take. Is that true? The room pulsed with flashes and microphones. Cass leaned against the podium, sunglasses hiding half his scowl, answering questions in clipped syllables. He was playing the role, rock god, untouchable. But his hand tightened around the mic stand, knuckles pale. I saw it first, the edge under the surface. He lasted 20 minutes before his jaw locked, his lips pressed into a thin white line, and his chest stuttered like an old engine. He shoved the mic into my hand mid-question, "We're done here," and stalked out. I tried to smooth it over with something about the music speaks for itself, but half the press followed him like vultures. I left the rest to PR and trailed him down the hallway, my stomach tight. The studio's back corridor was dim, lined with cases of cables and dusty amps. I found him in the machine room, wedged between racks of blinking servers. It was hotter than hell, the air heavy with static and machinery hum. Cass was on the floor, back against the rack, knees drawn up. His hands shook like they'd forgotten how to stay still. Each breath was too shallow, too fast. He didn't look like a rock god. He looked like a man being eaten alive by his own lungs. I crouched down. "Cass." No answer. His eyes were fixed somewhere past me, pupils too wide. "Okay." My voice steadied. "You're not dying. It just feels like it. Classic panic attack. Congrats, you're human after all." His breath hitched. I slipped closer, resting a hand against the cold floor so I wouldn't spook him. "Listen to me. You know tempo, right? Inhale 4 beats, hold 2, exhale 6, we'll count it out. Ready?" He shook his head violently. "Not ready?" "That's fine." I tilted my head. "Then I'll count for both of us. You're stubborn enough to keep up just to prove me wrong." That earned the tiniest flicker in his eyes. Annoyance, familiar ground. "Good." I started anyway. 1, 2, 3, 4. I exaggerated my inhale. Hold, 2, out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. His chest rose, uneven, but he tried. Again. And again. By the 4th round, his shoulders loosened a fraction. By the 6th, the tremor in his hands slowed. Sweat clung to his temple. Strands of hair plastered to his cheek. He was raw, stripped, vulnerable in a way the world never got to see. "Better," I said quietly. "Don't." His voice cracked. He swallowed hard. "Don't say that like I'm broken." "You're not broken," I said. "You're overloaded. Happens to the best machines. And to the loudest singers." A bitter laugh escaped him. "Machines don't have ghosts." I leaned back against the server rack beside him, shoulder brushing his. "Neither do songs, but you make them anyway." We sat in the hum and heat. Breaths finally sinking. His eyes slid toward me, dark, rimmed with exhaustion but alive. "Why are you here?" he muttered. "Because everyone else is out there selling the legend," I said. "And you needed someone to remind you you're still flesh and bone under it." He looked away fast, jaw working. Silence stretched. I tapped the console rack lightly, breaking it. "Next time warn me before you nearly pass out in front of half the city's reporters. My insurance doesn't cover public meltdowns." His lips twitched despite himself. "You're insufferable. And you're breathing," I countered. We stayed there longer than I meant to. Too close, too quiet. The chaos outside blurred to static, irrelevant. Finally, he let his head tip back against the metal, eyes half-lidded. "Why the hell do you keep showing up like this?" I swallowed. My answer was too dangerous to voice, so I smirked instead. "Because you'd make a terrible headline if you keeled over, and I'd never live down being the producer who killed the frontman mid-press tour." That got him, an actual laugh, low and reluctant. It rumbled in his chest before he caught it, almost like he'd forgotten how. We stayed until the noise outside dulled. When we finally stood, his hand brushed mine as he pushed up from the floor. Just a touch, accidental. But his fingers lingered a breath too long before he pulled away. As we walked out, he glanced back once at the machines, then at me. Something unreadable crossed his face, quiet as a secret. Why does he hold me tighter than everyone who ever called themselves mine? The bar smelled like stale hops and nostalgia, the kind of place where sticky floors told more stories than the jukebox. After rehearsal, Tano and Lark had disappeared with groupies or maybe with each other. Musicians were slippery like that. I lingered at the booth, sipping a soda because caffeine was the only fuel left in my bloodstream. Cass sat across from me, hunched over his glass like it had personally wronged him. The TV above the counter played a muted entertainment segment. My name flashed at the bottom alongside his. A photo of him mid-roar on stage, me half-blurred in the background. I didn't care until the chyron scrolled across, Cass Black, haunted by the past. The bartender turned the volume up. Rumors resurface about the tragic death of Black's Omega partner during the 2016 tour. Sources close to the band suggest the singer has never fully recovered. Cass stiffened. His glass hit the table harder than necessary, amber liquid splashing over the rim. "Turn it off," he barked. The bartender fumbled for the remote. Silence rushed back in, thick and awkward. I watched him. His jaw clenched, tendons tight as guitar strings. "So," I said finally, keeping my tone light, "they've upgraded from calling you unmanageable to haunted. That's progress." His glare could have shattered the glass. "Don't." I raised my hands. "Hey, I didn't write the piece." "No. But you're thinking it. Everyone thinks it. I'm thinking you just dented the table." For a moment, I thought he'd walk out. Instead, he slumped back, exhaling like he was bleeding air. "They don't know what they're talking about." "Then tell me," I said. His eyes flicked to mine, then away. The jukebox clicked, a sad ballad filling the background like unwanted commentary. "He was my partner," Cass muttered. "Omega. Sweet, quiet, did everything I asked. Too much." The last words tasted bitter on his tongue. "What happened?" I asked softly. Cass's laugh was humorless. "We were touring, riding high. I pushed him, pushed the band, pushed myself. He kept up, or tried to. He collapsed one night after a show. Heart gave out." His fingers tightened around his glass. "The doctors said it was stress, exhaustion. I say it was me." The air between us shifted. For once, the bar noise felt too loud. "I swore after that I'd never—" His voice cracked. He swallowed. "Never let another Omega close. They're too fragile. They break. And I break them." I stared at him, something hot crawling under my ribs. "So your solution is what? Declare an entire group of people weak and write yourself a free pass?" His head snapped up. "It's not a free pass. It's the truth. Omegas—" "Don't you dare." My voice cut sharper than I intended. "Don't you dare say Omegas are weak because one died under your shadow." He blinked, stunned by the bite. I leaned forward, anger surfacing in every syllable. "You see them as weak because it's easier than admitting you pushed too hard. Easier than admitting you wanted control more than balance. If you keep repeating that lie, maybe you'll believe it wasn't your fault. But you know it is." His knuckles whitened against the table. For a second, I thought he'd hit me with words cruel enough to scar. Instead, he said nothing. The silence itself felt like a fight. "Remi—" "No," I interrupted. "Don't try to justify it. You don't get to call us weak. Not when you're sitting here drowning in guilt because you couldn't protect the one person who trusted you." His chest rose and fell, hard and uneven. His eyes shone in the dim light, not with tears. Cass didn't cry, I was certain, but with a rawness he couldn't hide. I sat back, letting the edge of my anger simmer into something steadier. "You want to be angry at yourself? Fine. But don't paint every Omega with the same brush just because it absolves you." We stared at each other across the table. The jukebox hummed through the silence. Finally, he shoved his chair back, standing abruptly. "Let's go." The walk back to the studio was heavy with unspoken things. We didn't talk. The night air bit at our skin. Inside, the studio was empty, equipment glowing in the dark like watchful eyes. Cass dropped onto the couch, elbows on his knees, hair falling forward. I stood by the console, the weight of our argument still pressing against my ribs. "I didn't mean—" he started, then faltered. "You did," I said gently. "But maybe now you'll mean something else." His gaze lifted. Vulnerable. Cornered. "I don't know how to see it differently," he admitted. "Every time I try, I just see him. Collapsing, gone. And I can't—" his voice thinned. "I can't risk repeating it." "You don't have to," I said. "Not if you stop treating Omegas like they're China dolls." "Some of us bite back." His lips twitched at that. A near smile. Almost. We sat in the dim studio, the hum of amps the only witness. For once there were no insults, no sparring, just truth burning quietly between us. And for the first time I saw doubt flicker in Cass's eyes. Not in himself, but in the story he'd told for years. Maybe his ghosts weren't the only ones singing. Tour buses are strange beasts. By day they're rolling coffins, heavy with hangovers and discarded snack wrappers. By night they turn into confessionals, tight corridors, bad lighting, the smell of sweat and ambition pressed together until something cracks. We were 2 weeks deep into recording and promo runs, and already the bus felt like both prison and crucible. Cass paced the aisle, guitar strapped across his chest like a weapon. "The bridge is dead," he snapped. It drags because you insist on adding another chorus right before it." I fired back, perched on the counter by the tiny kitchenette. It's like stuffing dessert before the main course. Dessert sells, he growled. Not when it's half-baked. Tano popped his head out of his bunk. Can you two argue quieter? I'm trying to dream about normal jobs. Lark strummed a sarcastic line on his bass. They fight like parents in denial. Next track's gonna be called Custody Battle. Funny, Cass muttered. Not wrong. I rubbed my temples. Fine. Play it without the extra chorus. Prove me wrong. He smirked like I'd thrown down a gauntlet. The next 20 minutes were chaos. Cass snarling lyrics into the mic, me barking adjustments, Tano and Lark laughing between takes. Every fight carved a sharper edge into the song until, exhausted, we stumbled onto something raw and brilliant. That was the pattern. War, fire, and then, miracle. Every argument birthed another track that sounded like it had claws. And beneath it all, I felt my control slipping. Cass's presence pressed in on me, relentless. The way his eyes tracked me across a stage check. The way he'd lean too close over lyric sheets. His breath brushing my cheek. My carefully built disguise, Omega buried under leather and sarcasm, felt thinner every day. My skin prickled with every brush of contact, instincts clawing to the surface. I buried it in work. That was safer. The next show was a club gig. Sweaty, intimate. The crowd packed so tight you could feel their heartbeat through the floor. Backstage smelled of stale beer and electricity. The set list taped to the wall was already smeared with Cass's scrawl. You come in too late on verse 2, I told him as he tuned. He looked up, smirk curling. Maybe you're just too early. Maybe you're allergic to rhythm. You love my rhythm. Tano snorted behind his drum kit. Lark muttered, Get a room. Cass shot him a glare but didn't deny it. My stomach flipped, and I hated it. On stage, though, everything made sense. The lights burned hot, the crowd screamed every line like scripture, and Cass was fire personified. He prowled the stage, voice rough silk, every move demanding attention. I watched from the wings, every nerve lit. He wasn't just performing, he was daring me to watch, daring me to claim my place in the sound. Afterward, adrenaline still fizzing, we crashed back into the bus. Everyone else disappeared fast, Tano chasing a hookup, Lark collapsing into his bunk. It left me and Cass in the narrow lounge, the hum of the engine our only witness. He dropped onto the couch, head thrown back, sweat darkening his shirt. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You missed that downbeat, I said. His eyes opened, sharp and tired. I didn't miss. I stretched it into oblivion. You're impossible. And you're insufferable. Silence, stretched, charged. His gaze pinned me, heavy and unflinching. Why do you keep pushing me? He asked suddenly. Because you push back. That's not an answer. It's the only one you get. He laughed, low and incredulous. You're ridiculous. So are you, I said. We stared. The bus rumbled beneath us, the road outside endless, and then something cracked, maybe exhaustion, maybe the weight of weeks colliding. He pushed up, crossing the tiny space in 2 strides. I expected another fight, another barb. Instead, his hand landed on the counter beside me, pinning me there without touching. His face was inches from mine, his breath still ragged from the show. Say it again, he murmured. What? My throat was dry. That I'm insufferable. His mouth curved. Say it like you don't want to kiss me after. My laugh came out sharp. You're delusional. Probably, he said. And then he kissed me. It wasn't soft. It was messy, charged, all teeth and heat and weeks of unsaid words. I should have pulled away. Instead, I grabbed his shirt and dragged him closer. When we finally broke, we were both breathing like we'd sprinted a marathon. Well, I said, voice shaking more than I liked. That solves nothing. His grin was dangerous. It solves everything. I shoved him lightly back. Don't get poetic now. He collapsed onto the couch, still smirking. Admit it. You wanted that. I wanted silence, I lied. Liar. We sat in the thick quiet, the road humming beneath us, the taste of him still on my lips. For once, there were no insults sharp enough to cover the truth. Something had shifted. It wasn't just music tying us together anymore. It was the fire we lit in each other, the kind that couldn't be contained in chords or contracts. 2 wild notes, clashing and colliding, louder, raw, alive. The studio always felt like a sanctuary, safe, soundproof, sealed from the chaos of the outside world. But that morning, it was a battlefield before I even stepped inside. I knew something was wrong when every intern in the hallway went silent as I walked past. Phones clutched, eyes darting, whispers smothered too late. By the time I reached the control room, the headline glared from an abandoned tablet on the console. Producer Remi Cass. Secret Omega behind Black's wild new sound? My stomach dropped. The article wasn't speculation, it was a hit piece, complete with leaked medical records that should never have left a clinic. A single word, Omega, bolded like a brand. The door slammed open. Cass stood there, wild-eyed. The printout crumpled in his fist. "You lied to me." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried enough rage to rattle every cable in the room. I straightened, forcing my heartbeat to slow. "I didn't lie." His laugh was jagged. "You let me believe." He broke off, pacing, running a hand through his hair like he wanted to rip it out. "You let me think you were different. Strong?" "I am different," I snapped. "And I am strong. You just can't reconcile that with your convenient little categories." "Convenient?" He whirled on me, eyes blazing. "Do you have any idea what it's like watching someone die because they couldn't handle this life? Because I couldn't save them? And you?" He jabbed a finger at me. "You stood there, day after day, making me believe you were—" "Believing what, Cass? That I was untouchable?" I stepped closer, anger cutting through the fear. "That I could only stand toe-to-toe with you if I were alpha enough, beta enough, anything but what I am? You wanted me to be your equal, but only on your terms." Silence pressed against us, thick as smoke. Finally he whispered, "Raw, you should have told me." I swallowed hard. "No. Because the second I did, you'd stop seeing me. You'd see the word instead. Just like you are now." He flinched, like I'd struck him. For a heartbeat I thought it was over, that we'd collapse under the weight of it, contract shredded, music gutted, all of it gone. But then the anger in his eyes shifted. Not vanished, but cracked. "You think I only saw the label?" His voice dropped low, rough. "I saw you, Remi. Every fight, every word, every damn note we bled into these tracks. You think any of that was weakness?" My breath caught. "I don't know what the hell I'm doing," he admitted, raking a hand over his face. "But I know I can't do it without you." The words hit harder than any chord he'd ever played. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then I walked past him to the piano in the corner. My hands shook as I pressed the first keys, soft and uncertain. A new melody spilled out, hesitant, then surer, like testing ground before takeoff. Cass turned, listening. His guitar was in his hands before he realized it. He strummed once, twice, finding where his sound fit against mine. It was clumsy at first, overlapping, clashing. We argued through the music the way we always did. Me insisting on restraint, him demanding fire. But something shifted in the collision. His chords bent around my melody. My rhythm carved space for his roar. A song began to form, raw and unfiltered. Not polished, not safe. "Us, lyrics," he muttered, scribbling on a scrap of paper. "Needs words." I leaned over his shoulder, reading the jagged scrawl. They weren't love confessions, not outright. They were admissions, about fear, about fire, about the way two wild notes could make harmony if they stopped trying to drown each other out. We sang it together, voices tangling, rough and imperfect. The control room filled with sound too big for its walls, too alive to be caged. By the final chorus, our eyes locked. Neither of us looked away. The track ended in silence that rang louder than any applause. Cass's chest heaved. His knuckles were white on the guitar. Slowly, he lowered it, stepping closer until the space between us disappeared. "This," he said hoarsely, "isn't weakness." "No," I whispered back. "It's the only thing keeping us alive." And then he kissed me. Not like the reckless heat of the tour bus, but like a vow, rough, trembling, terrified and certain all at once. The door creaked open. Tano stuck his head in, took one look, and swore. "About time," he muttered, slamming it shut again. We both laughed, breathless. The tension didn't vanish, but it changed. It wasn't a noose anymore. It was a rope we both held, pulling in the same direction. Later, standing in the empty concert hall for the final rehearsal, we tested the song on the massive sound system. The speakers roared it back at us, bigger than we'd imagined, echoing through every corner. Cass turned to me, sweat shining on his temple, eyes fierce. "This is it," he said. "The final chord." I nodded. The music wasn't just ours anymore. It was the bridge between us, the proof that risk and love could share the same stage. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what label the world would slap on me. Because when we played, no one heard Omega, Alpha, producer, or singer. They only heard us. The album dropped on a Thursday. By Saturday, it was everywhere. Billboards, playlists, late-night hosts fumbling to describe it. Raw, they said. Unpolished. Dangerous. Alive. It was climbing charts faster than anyone expected. Faster than I'd dared to dream. But numbers weren't real, not like this. The real thing was the stadium breathing under my feet. 50,000 people crammed into seats, lights swarming the night sky. The sound of anticipation rumbling like thunder before a storm. The stage crew ran around with headsets and clipboards, but it all blurred. Because tonight, our music wasn't trapped in speakers. It had teeth. I stood side stage, headset looped around my neck, pretending my pulse wasn't trying to break out of my skin. Cass paced the wings, guitar slung low, hair falling wild across his face. He looked feral. Electric. And yet, when his eyes found mine, there was something else. Something steadier than the roar outside. "You ready?" I asked. He smirked. "I was born ready." Then, quieter, "You?" "Never," I said. And he laughed. The kind of laugh that burned away the nerves. The house lights dropped. The stadium screamed. The first chord hit like lightning. Tano's drums cracked, Lark's bass shook the floor, and then Cass's voice tore through it all, raw velvet fire and blade. The crowd erupted, singing every lyric like they'd known it forever. From the wings, I felt the sound crawl into my bones. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. It was alive, jagged edges and all, the way we'd meant it to be. Cass prowled the stage like it belonged to him, which, maybe, it did. The spotlight carved him in gold, sweat shining, veins straining as he poured himself into every line. And then, between songs, when the crowd finally quieted enough to breathe, he looked sideways. Not at the audience. At me. His mic caught it. "This," he said, voice low, rough. "This is ours. Our music. Our roar." The stadium screamed again, thinking he meant them. Maybe he did. But his gaze stayed on me, steady, fierce. I swallowed hard, heat climbing my throat. No one else knew, no one else needed to. The set roared on. Track after track, each one a battle won. Ashes for Breakfast had the crowd howling. Ghost in the speaker turned the stadium into one long chant. And then came the new one, the song we'd written the night of the fight. The one that started as an argument and ended as a confession. The opening chords rolled out, quiet at first. The crowd leaned in, sensing something different. Cass's voice dropped lower, rougher. Every lyric a blade honed against mine. The words weren't subtle. Fear, fire, two notes colliding until they found harmony. By the chorus, 50,000 voices tried to match him, but it was impossible. This one wasn't theirs yet. It was ours. From my place by the console, I mouthed the words along with him. He saw it. He smiled. Not the wolf smile he wore for the world, but the small one, the real one, reserved for when we stopped fighting long enough to breathe. The last song hit like an earthquake. Final chord. Lights blazing. Fireworks tearing the sky open. Cass held the note until his throat broke. The crowd screaming it back. The sound rattling my ribs. The stage went dark. Silence. Just for a heartbeat. Then the flood. 50,000 people roaring, stomping, chanting his name, the band's name, the song's name. A wall of sound so huge it blurred into vibration, like the earth itself was singing. Cass stood at the edge of the stage, head bowed, chest heaving. When he lifted his gaze, it cut across the chaos and landed on me again. And for once, I didn't look away. Because I knew what that look meant. Not just survival. Not just success. It meant we'd carved something out of fire and fury, and it had teeth. We weren't just a band and a producer. Not just Alpha and Omega. Not just enemies turned reluctant allies. We were a force. Our music wasn't a product. It was a growl. A scream. A promise. And together, it roared loud enough to drown out the world.